Hi, everyone. We're going to get started. Welcome this afternoon to the What Every District and Building Leader Should Know About K-3 Literacy Assessment Data. This is the webinar from Pearson Ames Web. And my name is Abe Christ. Actually, before I introduce myself, I would like to ask if you could please disable or refrain from launching any AI note takers or attendees. That would be appreciated. So thank you. Again, my name is Abe Christ. I am in the performance office at the State Department of Ed. It is our office that handles all the collection of the K-3 data as well as the overall administration of it. I'm joined here by my colleagues today, Kim Johnson and Katie Seifert. Kim and Katie are also
then.
No,
Fine,
nothing's
but-
come up, but I'm looking out for Alex like I do every single year.
Mhm.
No longer friends with Violet.
just going to mute someone here. Thank you. So Kim and Katie, welcome. And I'm also joined by our colleagues from Ames Web Pearson, Scott Piotrowski, Noah Raskin, and Stephanie Leal. I'm going to hand it over to Scott in 1 minute. But before I do that, I'm just going to say a couple more words that, again, today's purpose is really intended for district and building leaders to support and administer the administration of the K-3 literacy assessment, Ames Web. Scott and team will be reviewing various district and school reports and talking about analyzing them and so forth. If you are not a district or building leader, that's totally fine. You're welcome to stay. We'd love to have you actually. So that is just as well. We want to remind you that tomorrow at the end of the school day, our end of year window closes. So as a reminder, we did a BOY, MOY, and now the EOY. So our window technically closes tomorrow. And we are asking that everybody if you're a non-DSA district, you provide any data to us before the June 26th. As a reminder, next year we will be doing we will be collecting data for all windows. So beginning of year, middle of year, end of year. We didn't do any collection this year for the beginning of the year. And so this next year will be all three. And once again, our office, Katie and Kim, myself are working collaboratively also with many of our colleagues and sort of working quietly behind the scenes to do this collection, and the performance office will be back again next year. So with that said, I'm going to turn it over to Scott, and Scott presented in the winter and the middle of the year webinar and did a great job. So it's great to see you back. Scott, the baton is yours. Thank you.
Thanks, Abe. I appreciate it. And I wanted to just thank our partners at the State Board of Ed there in Connecticut for providing us with this platform to speak to you all today. Thank you for being here. I know it's a very busy time of the year for you as the school year is wrapping up. I'm here in New York and ours ends in 2 weeks too. So, we're all in the thick of it. So I just wanted to thank you very much for your time today. My name is Scott Piotrowski. That's the voice that you will be hearing today. I'm one of the learning facilitators for Ames Web. My colleague and friend Stephanie Leal will be watching the chat for your thoughtful questions today as we move forward. Just a couple of housekeeping things to get through before we start. If you can have your cameras on, that's great. We like to see smiling faces and instead of staring into the abyss, but we understand if you've got things going on in the background, if your camera is off. If you can remain on mute, that'll be great. That'll minimize the distractions going on in the background and for everybody's ability to learn the content today. Please feel free, though, to ask questions. The best way is probably the chat, very honestly. I don't mind you coming off mute. But Stephanie's going to keep an eye on that chat as well as Noah is, and they're going to be able to answer questions for you there as well. And they'll let me know if there's anything that I need to address. And just one note about the deck that you're seeing right now. The slide deck is copyrighted and it's not distributed, but there was a workbook provided, and the workbook is almost a complete replica of the slide deck. So you're going to see that it's virtually the same. And I'm going to be in the account most of the time anyways. I'm going to hop back and forth a couple times, but quite honestly, this is going to be more of an interactive type thing with us in the software today. terms of our learning objectives, just really quickly, I want to show you how, first of all, the access, sometimes that's the biggest barrier to using any platform is how do I actually get to the stuff I want to use? But also show you how to interpret that data at the school level and the district level for K-3 so that it can support the decision making that you have, and it can hopefully lead to informing on some of those systemic decisions and guiding school improvement planning. My hope at the end is to reserve a little bit of time for Q&A. Please do that along the way, though, as we go. We have a very full 90 minutes. I promise you, you will get your money's worth today. There's a lot to share in 90 minutes, but I'm going to try my very, very best to try to leave a little bit of time at the end for any questions. And I'll even hang, a few minutes afterwards if need be to make sure that we get our questions addressed. If you've been on any of the sessions with us this year, you know that we like to refer to a data analysis protocol. This is really kind of a truncated version of it. It's really kind of where we are now, sort of at the end of the school year. You're starting to get, those last data points collected, and it's what do you do now with all of that time and energy that went into collecting the data so that you can make some decisions going forward through trend analysis. And then certainly you're looking to use this data for future programmatic decisions, even being able to start to form those groups already before, the kiddos come back in the fall. So this is really kind of where we're at today. So we're going to look at the data. So we're kind of the IC stage of things, and we're going to be looking for those trends. We're going to be looking for any patterns. What do you observe in the data as we go today? That leads into sort of the I wonder phase, which is like, why does the data look the way that it does? Are there some explanations for it? Are there some things that we would like to replicate, things we would like to change? But it's really that inquiry stage where you're wondering why the data looks the way it does. And there's a myriad of, reasons that data can look the way it does. It could be just that cohort of students that year. It could be, a whole host of things. But that's where we really start to kind of drill down and see, like, why is this occurring? And then from there, it's the I will stage, right? It's the implementation stage, and how do we create kind of a plan going forward? So once we've examined the data and understood it, we're going to implement the plan. And really what that is it's moving from insight into action. It's one thing to look at your data and say, oh, wow, that looks interesting. It's a whole nother thing to actually actively do something with that data to create change for your students and your teachers. Okay. So these implementation decisions, they can and they should happen at multiple levels. Our focus today will be on the school and the districts, but you're going to see that, toggling back even to grade and classroom data is really simple once you understand the reports that we're going to be looking at today. One final note here, you can see that there's different implementation actions depending on the level that you're looking at. It's really a data team's responsibility to kind of facilitate conversations to make sure that the data is used purposefully, right? And that at every level, and that support others receive and kind of translating those insights into meaningful actions, because benchmark data isn't just about identifying gaps, it's about closing them with those intentional informed instruction and systemic actions. So we will focus our conversations primarily on district and school as we move forward today. To do that, so to accomplish our objectives that we talked about earlier, we're going to primarily look at 3 AIMSweb Plus group benchmark reports. There's a number of them. As I said, in our 90-minute time, I'm going to pack in 3 of them, and that's going to seem like a lot. There are, a couple more, but I think these ones really address our objectives best today. So the objectives that we're going to try to achieve is we're going to look for instructional trends. So I'm going to show you in some of these reports where we can start to look at some data and see the trend of it. I think I heard Abe say that you collected winter and spring this year, and then it'll be all 3 next year. If that's incorrect, let me know. But we'll be looking at that data as it moved, throughout the year. One of the other objectives that we want to cover is making those future decisions for programming. Like, can we take AIMSweb Plus benchmark data and have it actually be part of the conversation about programming, both at the core instruction tier 1 and then those intervention levels tier 2 and tier 3. And then really the third focus that we're going to look at today is, can you start to already kind of formulate groups of students before they even come back in the fall? Like, do we have to wait for that fall benchmarking to be able to form our groups, or can we hit the ground running? And I'm going to show you a really nice report in here. It's actually part of a report that I think will help lend itself to that. So these are the three we're going to look at: benchmark distribution, tier transition, and ROI growth norms. We're going to jump right in and start with tier transition. That's a big fancy name. Everybody likes to call it the triangle report for obvious reasons. There's two objectives that we will meet with this report, and one of them is looking at district and school trends. So trends across the data. We're going to do that through a couple different focus questions that I'm going to share with you in just a second. But the other objective that we're going to accomplish with this particular report is looking at being able to start thinking about forming those groups as you move into, the fall, even before that fall benchmarking occurs. So in your workbook are all of these questions that are listed. These are just sample questions, and what you're going to find is, like, some of our objectives, the questions could actually serve multiple objectives. It's kind of an interesting thing. As I started putting this together, I was like, oh, that question could serve this objective and that objective, so it can actually do both. These are strictly just sample questions. This is certainly not, the extent of what you can get out of these reports, but it's just an idea of what you can answer by looking at them. As we go today, I'm going to start moving filters around and things to get the graphs to generate so that it shows you some data. You might want to be in your own account. If you would rather just kind of watch and listen and learn, if that's more of your learning style, totally fine with me. What you might want to do, especially as we get into the benchmark distribution report, is you might just want to kind of take note of, like, how I'm changing some of the drop downs to get it to view the way it is. Because that's really the trick of these, is being able to navigate those drop downs to help answer the questions that you're seeking an answer for. So the first question that we're going to start with is, did a majority of our students benefit from Tier 1 instruction by the end of the year? Okay, and that's an important question to ask, because we want to reflect on that core curriculum that all the students are receiving. If we don't have a large number of them benefiting from it, our efforts have to start there while we're still trying to, like, provide intervention to students, right? So at the end of the year, it's almost like an autopsy, and we're like, how did it go? By the end of the year, did we get most of our kids kind of benefiting from that Tier 1 instruction alone? Or, do we need to kind of take a step back and look at this? So as I generate this graph, if you want to generate your own, you can certainly do that. If you see success to this question, a follow-up question to that is, like, well, what do I attribute the success to? Like, what went well, and can I replicate that next year? Do I want to replicate that next year? Is it able to be replicated so that I can get the same kind of results or even better next year? And if you look at the graph and you're like, I really wish those results looked a little bit different, like a little bit better, then we start thinking about, all right, well, what kind of changes do we think need to happen with Tier 1? Is it more of a programmatic type of thing? Is it more of a professional development type of thing? Is it a support thing where we need resources kind of shifted? But it should at least invite a conversation about why the data looks the way it does, and then certainly at the school level and even at the district level, we can also ask the question of, is there difference amongst the grade levels and even the classrooms? Are we getting really great growth for a couple of years and then all of a sudden there's a giant drop off? Or are all of these classrooms doing really well except one of them, and how do we capitalize on that, and how do we make some changes there? So with that said, let me switch over to the platform, because what I want to do before I even answer that question is I want to actually explain the report to you and what you're seeing, because I think that is a key component to this. So I'm going to transition real quick. Now, I'm getting logged into a Sandbox account, and the Sandbox account is what it is. It's got fictitious data in it, and some of the data is going to look repetitive. It's obviously not real, but I just want you to get sort of familiar with how to even get to these things and how to answer some of these questions. So the first thing is, how do we find it? Okay, so right in the center of Aimsweb is a tab that says Group Reports. Okay, so the three that we're going to talk about today live under this tab. We are going to have another report kind of supplement in a minute or two, and that one's going to be found somewhere else, but we'll talk about that when we get there. Okay, so we're starting with the group reports tab, and then on the left, the drop down, you can open that up, and it's down at the bottom, tier transition, not tier transition details, but tier transition. And as with all of these reports, they all have a number of drop downs on the left-hand side. The truth of the matter is you usually only need to change a couple of them. It might look a little bit overwhelming, but most of them are going to default kind of to where they need to be. But the first question that we wanted to sort of approach here is, did a majority of our students benefit by the end of the year? So one of the things you need to know is that if you are a district level person and you want to look at data across the entire district, so let's say grade 3 across the whole district, you're going to want to make sure that when you generate reports in AimsWeb, you do not have a school in the school field. So there's an X here. So if I'm a district person, which actually I am in my own district, I manage the AimsWeb account in my district, I'm going to X that out. And I'm going to make sure nothing's in the class. So it's kind of bare bones, right? So all I want to do is I just want to see one of these grade levels. Okay, so stripping out the school, stripping out the class, for those of you at district level, is going to bring back data for the entire grade level that you're looking for. Those of you at the school level, you're not going to have the ability to strip out schools. You're going to be able to look just at your school. You will be able, though, to strip out the class. So if you want to look at the grade level across your entire just building, you want to make sure that you have something in your school field, but that the class field is empty. So it's really just kind of manipulating those fields depending on your level of access to get the view that you want in the data. Okay. I'm going to change the battery to reading. And at this point, I am going to click view and refresh. Now I'm starting with a district level view. I could easily get back to the school view just by putting something in my school field and clicking view and refresh again. And if I wanted to get to the class level, I can just put something in the class level and click view and refresh. Okay, so it's either putting things in there or stripping them out, depending on what you're trying to look for. So I'm going to kind of get myself back to the district level here. And let me get this refreshed. It's not happy right now. There we go. So just a quick explanation. The first question that we're going to ask and answer is actually going to be just from the triangle piece. So let's start there with an explanation of what you're seeing in the triangles. The triangles represent the percentage and number count of students that are in the different tiers. Okay, so when you see 3 colors in AimsWeb Plus, that is considered criterion reference data. To try to simplify that, if we were all in a room together and I asked you to stand up and I said, oh, if you're 5 foot nothing to 5'5", you go stand in that corner. If you're 5'6" to 5'8", you go stand in that corner. Like, I'm organizing us based on cut scores essentially. So for AimsWeb's purposes, the way that they're cutting the data is relative to a target. Okay, and the default target in AimsWeb is the national 30th percentile. So what they're saying with these 3 levels, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, is that it's really a risk indicator. And you can actually see that at the top here. There's a key that shows you that the green one is low risk, yellow moderate risk, and the red is high risk. So it's high risk or low risk of what? Well, of not reaching that target. And that's how they divide these students into these different tiers. Okay, so if you've got a large amount of students in the green, that indicates that they are likely being successful with that tier 1 instruction. So that goes back to that first question. Did a majority of students benefit from tier 1 instruction by the end of the year? I can come to my spring triangle and take a look. Now, right under the triangle, you're going to see tier 3, tier 2, and tier 1, and then a bunch of numbers. The first number that's out front of each of those, that's outside of the parentheses, is the number count of students. And the number that's inside the parentheses is like the percentage that they make up of the student body. Now you can tell that this is fake data because I'm looking at an entire district and I only have like 30 kids. It's a very, very small district, apparently. They do exist at that size, believe it or not. But yeah, this would be a very, very small district. So what I'm looking at is at tier 1, I've got 19 kids, which make up 63% of my population at that low risk level. Okay, which means I've still got 37% of my kids that are either moderate risk or high risk. That's a number that I'm not really all that comfortable with. If you look at anything from best practice and any literature on RTI or MTSS, and you look at these triangles, 80% is really what you want in the green, no more than 15 in the yellow, and about 5, less than 5 in the red. So I'm not really quite at 80 yet. What I might do if I have historical data, right? If I've got something in the winter, and the next year you'll have all 3, is I'm looking at the improvement. Hopefully I'm getting some improvement. My green grows and my yellow and my red shrink. That's another, I think, valuable piece of information. But by the end of the year, I'm hoping to see a lot of green and not a lot of yellow and not a lot of red. All right. So just by using the triangles, we can answer a question like, how's tier 1? How did it function? How did it do throughout the school year? Did we capture most of the kiddos with just that level? Because if we don't, and that green is really small and the yellow and the red are really large, what that usually means is I've got to push back on some of those supplemental services, those folks that provide intervention, and those seats are limited. So I've got to really go back to kind of the drawing board if at the end of a year I'm realizing at this grade level or class or whatever it is across the grade, across the school, if I'm not seeing the results that I want, that's where we start asking questions about, what's happening and then implementing a plan to move forward. So that's at the district level. Like I said, I can easily pop in a school here. And for those of you that are school folks, now data is probably going to look the same. It's probably the same 30 kids at one building and, because of these training accounts. But now I'm looking at it from the school lens for all of grade 3. And then, like I said, you could even drill down to the class level. So if you're curious looking, and your classes are going to be labeled differently than these are, obviously. But if you're like, hey, I wonder how so-and-so's class performed by the end of the year. And then you start kind of making comparisons there and realizing, do we have some areas where we need to provide some support, or are there things we would like to replicate, that kind of thing. What I want to share here is when you see the 3 colors in AIMSweb, it is in relationship to the composite. You'll notice that as we go through this, when we see red, yellow, and green, we're not seeing subtests. So you might be thinking, well, that's great. I like the composite, but I'd really like to drill down to see, like, by the end of the school year, how are the kids performing on oral reading fluency or letter name fluency or any of those subtests that you gave in benchmarking. The next report that we look at, the benchmark distribution, is going to be able to do that and really disaggregate the data even more. So this is kind of your look at the overall kind of health, based on the composite to answer that question about did tier 1 benefit most of our students. Okay. Now, we don't even need to leave this report, and I'm going to be able to answer a second question for you. And again, at district level, at school level, whatever your level is. Again, I'll kind of start back here at district. But if I look at your workbook or even my slide, the second question is, was there success in moving students from a more intensive tier to a less intensive tier? So at the end of the year, as we're kind of doing this autopsy, I want to know, am I moving students out of those intensive interventions? Because that's really the goal. It's not Hotel California where you check out, but you never really leave. Like, you actually want to be able to move them. Like, I don't want you to have to sit in the small group intervention, for the rest of your life. Our goal is to move you back. How do we know that? I mean, certainly we could look at the triangle and realize, like, okay, like, it looks like the green got a little bigger, and yeah, the red definitely got smaller from winter to spring. But I don't really know why that's happening if I just look at the triangles. I need a little bit more information about the movement of the students in there so that I can start to make some judgments about the success of my tiered interventions. Because if I'm not moving kids, then I've probably got to start looking at those services. And that could be just the type of instruction they're getting in those tiered services. It could be the amount of days, it could be the amount of time. You might not have an intervention block right now, and you might turn around and be like, oh my gosh, like I got to do something different. Maybe an intervention block is an option. Like there's all different things that might be impacting why tiered services aren't really helping move the students around. But that's what the middle section of this graph is. It definitely requires an explanation. So I'm going to explain to you what you're seeing here. And I'm going to date myself by telling you that it reminds me for some reason of the Chutes and Ladders board game, where you can go like up the ladders, and if you hit the wrong spot, you come down the slides. Because this is really going to be like, how many kids are we moving out of the tier 3, out of the tier 2? Hopefully not out of tier 1. Hopefully they stay there. But the way that this works in the middle is, and I'll start over here in this grid to the left that says fall to winter transition. For you, if you've got 2 data points, you're kind of looking at winter to spring and then fall to spring. But either one of these, sort of the interpretation is the same. It always starts in the first column with the starting benchmark period. So if yours is winter, let's do winter. I see, I had 10 kids in that tier 3 high risk of not reaching the spring target thing. And they made up 31% of my kids. That's not good. That's a lot. You've got an upside down triangle almost at that point. What happens to them though, as they go from winter to spring, and that's kind of the jump to the next column, is that 6 of them stay red. So no movement. Doesn't mean no growth. It just means no movement, right? And then 2 of them actually go up, or I never know how to say it, down, whatever, down to tier 2, I guess, or up to tier 2, whatever. So 2 of them have actually moved. That's tough to do. I'll tell you, I was a school psychologist for 7 years. I've been in this role for 15 years as a district coordinator. It's tough to move kids in tier 3. They are tough. So you celebrate those successes and you try to capitalize on them by looking at, who those 2 kids are, what went really well for them, and how do we build on that? But that's nice. And you hope maybe even next year they kind of can continue to move, into that next tier, which would be the green one. As we continue and we look and we're like, okay, we had 4 in the winter that were yellow. That was 13%. Okay, that's not bad. You want to be around 15% there, so that's not terrible. 3 of them stayed yellow and 1 of them moved to the green, which is nice. So we're having some success here, right? You're not going to move every single student from one benchmark to the next into the next tier. It's not going to happen. So you celebrate the small successes with this. So moving, 1 or 2 students from one benchmark to the next is good. You certainly would want more, but we'll take what we can get. 18 of them were green. That was 56% of your students. That's low. That's low. If you've only got 56% of the kids, you've got tier 1 that probably needs to be looked at. That's why when you look up at the triangle, you can kind of see it. Good news is all 18 of them come the spring stayed in that tier. So we didn't see any of them kind of, slip back, which is important. We don't want to see that regression as we go through the school year. So really just kind of by looking at this, you can kind of start to get a sense of like, are we moving students in the right direction? If we are, great. How do we capitalize and continue that? If we're not, then what do we need to look at? And I already kind of rattled off a few things, that might be areas to consider, whether it be professional development, programming, scheduling, things like that, if you're not seeing the movement that you had hoped for. And then you have a fall to spring as well. So you've got kind of these transitions between benchmarks, but then you've got a culmination of the entire school year at the end as well. All right. So look at that. One graph, we've already asked and answered 2 questions. Now I'm on the district view of it again, but just to remind you, and I'm going to keep doing this, it's really simple for me to get to the school view just by simply changing or adding a school. I can do that. And I can also, if I'm at the school level and kind of want to look at classrooms, I can start to sprinkle in classrooms if I want to. Okay. All right. So how are we feeling so far on a Friday Eve? Any questions thus far? We've now, in one report, looked at the health of really tier 1. That was our first question. And now we've looked at the health of our tier 2 and our tier 3. Are we moving those students? The third question, and again, we're not even leaving this report, we're just scrolling down a little bit further. The third question in your workbook is, are the students in tier 2 and tier 3 closing the gap? The holy grail of education. Are they closing the gap? Are they growing at a rate that's fast enough, right? So we get into this conversation about growth. So before I show you the specifics here of this part of the report, we need to have a little bit of a conversation about the metric that is within Aimsweb Plus that talks about growth, and it's called SGP, or Student Growth Percentile. Okay, so Student Growth Percentile is giving you an idea from one period of time to another period of time, the percentage of their growth relative to other kiddos in the nation that started kind of with the similar benchmark score that they did. So if you're doing like a fall to winter, or in your case, more of a winter to spring, what you're looking at is like, okay, those kids in the winter, let's say they were like in the yellow color, that orange color, whatever color, they're going to get compared to other students nationally that were kind of in that same standing as they were. And then we're going to watch their growth from winter to spring and be able to assign a percentile of growth to it. So a little bit different than the national norms where you're seeing all the colors usually on the benchmark screen. This is a growth percentile, okay? Just a real quick analogy, hopefully it'll kind of help hammer home this point. And somebody had emailed in some advanced questions. If you're on the line, thank you. Those were extremely thoughtful questions. One of them was about growth. And so I'm going to give the same example in my response in the email now. I think about running a race, right? And there's 3 laps left. I'm 3 laps behind. If I'm going to catch up, I've got to run faster than you for the last couple laps. Otherwise, at best, I'm going to stay 3 laps behind. If we kind of transfer that to Aimsweb and have that kind of make sense, running sort of average when I'm behind is like at the 50th percentile of growth, right? Like, good for me. I'm running the same pace you are. The problem is I didn't do that for the first 3 laps, and that's why I'm now behind, or however many laps came first. So for students for me to catch up in that race, I've got to run faster than you. And if we translate that to Aimsweb and we look at growth percentiles, you got to be above 50. That's just the nature of it, right? Like, I got to run faster than you. Granted, I might still end up 2 laps behind. Your students might end up a year behind or 2 years behind at the end of the year, but they might have actually closed a lot of gap and a lot of space within that year. And I might close a lot of gap in that race. I might end up only 1 lap behind. But I'm never going to do that if I don't get a growth percentile above 50. If it's less than 50, that's me running slower than you. And then I'm 4 laps behind, 5 laps behind, So hopefully that kind of tie to sort of a logical real world thing is going to help when we look at student growth percentiles in Aimsweb Plus. Okay. So where you're going to find that is at the very bottom of this triangle. Okay, it says tier transition growth. So just a reminder of the question we're trying to answer here is, am I getting my tier 2 and tier 3 kiddos, at least the way they're assigned in Aimsweb, are they closing the gap? How do I make that decision? Well, I've got to see an SGP above 50, right? And they're in increments of 5. So really what you're going to see is like 55 and above. So when I look down at the table there at the bottom, I see those tiers again, red, yellow, and green. I also see columns of the different seasons, right? Fall to winter, winter to spring, fall to spring, okay? And then within each of those, I've got 2 kind of like sub columns, a rate of improvement and an SGP, student growth percentile. The rate of improvement is difficult to communicate. It's difficult to understand. That's why we have the SGP, because the SGP is kind of like a conversion of it, if you will. People can understand percentiles usually pretty easily. But here what you're looking at is the average SGP of students in tier 3, tier 2, tier 1, right? So you're going to have some that are higher, some that are lower. But on average, that's the SGP, or the growth that you're getting out of those kiddos. Remember what I said about the race. If you're behind, my growth or my speed has to be faster than you. So translate that to AIMSweb. If I want my kiddos in the yellow and the red on average to be able to say, yeah, they're catching up, those SGPs have got to be above 50. Now on my screen, red is at 35. On average, my tier 3 kiddos, the gap is getting larger. That doesn't mean everybody, but just on average, that gap's getting larger. I'm running slower, and I'm going to end up 4 laps behind. So if I'm a district administrator, a building administrator, I'm wondering why I'm not getting better average growth out of those tiered interventions. And it goes back to some of those similar considerations we talked about before. Okay. Tier 2 is a little bit closer, that yellow color, 48, but still I'm maintaining like status quo at best. I'm going to end up the race 3 laps behind. So I'm concerned about that too. Now at tier 1, that green color, yes, I want the best growth I can get. But if their growth is a little bit less than 50, it's not as detrimental because they're kind of on track anyways. It will catch up with them over time if that pattern continues. If they continue to get, lower growth, eventually it'll catch up with them. It's not as detrimental though for them to have growth that's a little bit lower than 50 because they're kind of humming along the way they should. It's really detrimental for those kiddos that are already behind. It's like a double whammy. You're behind and your growth is slow, right? And that makes it really difficult to, get those students to catch up. So I hope that makes sense. If not, please ask any clarifying questions. But, in one graph, we've answered 3 different questions. One about tier 1 effectiveness, a question about tier 2, tier 3 effectiveness, and a question about growth, all from the same report. All right, so if I move, I'm not even going to leave this report. I'm just going to show you something different about it. But what I want to do is I want to kind of move the focus of why we're using the report. So that those first, 3 questions that we just asked and answered, we're kind of really we're looking at trends, right? We're identifying some trends as tier 1 being beneficial, tier 2, tier 3, those kind of things. I want to move the needle a little bit here to one of our other objectives, which was how can I start to use the data I have right now to start to determine those groups for intervention in the fall before the benchmarking. Like the day school starts, I want to hit the ground running. And I think that's a fantastic idea because benchmarking usually, by the time you're done in the fall, at least in my district, like 3 weeks of the school year is gone. And that's a lot of time, especially for students that are behind. So I'm going to show you, we're going to be in the same graph. We're not even leaving the triangle graph. I'm going to show you a little different way to use it. And then we're going to supplement it with another graph to answer these 2 questions. Because I think answering these 2 questions naturally start to show you who those kids are that are going to need intervention right from the get-go in the fall. Because let's be honest, if you're behind in the spring, usually students don't have magical fairy dust sprinkled on them in the summer that all of a sudden makes them, where they're supposed to be. They usually come back, still needing the assistance. In fact, sometimes more because of that summer gap. So we're gonna use these 2 together. So the triangle graph and then this one, the benchmark comparison, to be able to answer these questions. All right. So let me transition back to here. Again, I'm not even leaving this report. I am going to show you kind of a little bit of an unknown thing about it though, because when we show people this report, the natural question often is, who are those kids? Who are those kids in red? I want to know who those kids are. And you'll notice when I kind of scroll down here, I don't see any student names, right? I'm at the district level. Here, let me go back to the district level. Right? No school, no class, no kids, right? You folks at the school level, throw a school in there. No kids still. When I get to the class level, what's going to happen, and you almost don't even notice it, is this little button right above view and refresh appears that says include student details. If you watch closely, I'm going to get rid of the class. It's going to disappear. I'm going to put the class back in there and it reappears. Now, by switching on the student details and clicking view and refresh, if I scroll down now, I get a whole lot of information. Now, I would bet dollars to donuts already that some of you at the, especially the district level, but at the school level too, are like, that's cool, but wow, I got to do that every class by class. Like that's no, so it's not going to happen. So there actually is kind of a cheat code to get it to generate entire grade levels at a time in a building and across a district. And the secret sauce is creating a custom group. So we have things called custom groups in AimsWeb. And I know my friend Stephanie is going to post a link for you in the chat at some point to what we call a quick step guide. And the guide will show you exactly how to set them up. But essentially, you take all the kids in a grade level, dump them in a custom group. And then when you generate this list, all of them are there, okay, by building by district, however you want to do it. Where that occurs once you do it is see this first drop down that says roster type. There's only two options. It always defaults to the school, but the second option is my student groups. So even though we're seeing this by class now, just know you can do it by grade level too. Okay, and then the secret again to it is creating a custom group. I've done it in my district. Every single building has a custom group for every single grade level. It does not take long at all. You can do it in a matter of minutes, and then it enhances what you can do with this report. Let me explain what you're seeing here and then how it kind of dovetails with getting kids into those intervention groups, okay, or at least starting to think about them. This is one of the places in AimsWeb where it's going to commingle the two different ways of splitting data. So AimsWeb can be, the data can be split by criterion reference, that 3-color, red, yellow, green, that's cut scores. AimsWeb data can also be cut by national norms. How do students compare to other students in the nation? That's the 5 colors. So you're seeing them kind of present on here at the same time. If you're wondering who the kiddos are in the triangles up above, you're going to look under the headers of the red, the yellow, and the green, and that'll tell you who they are. Now, what you also have in this is the percentile of the composite. Okay, so fall, winter, spring, you have the composite percentile based on the national norms. Now, when you're thinking about putting your intervention groups together, you might be thinking, that's okay, but like I really kind of want to get a little bit more skill-based. Like I'd really love to have a homogeneous group of kids that are really struggling with letter sounds or segmenting or whatever, right? That's where the other report's going to be a nice supplement. I'll get to that in just a second. Okay, the other thing that I love about this report is it is the only report in AimsWeb that will put all of the students' SGPs on the same report. Otherwise, you're digging into them individually. So if you're looking to kind of make judgments about growth and you want to line everybody up next to each other so you can see who's got good growth and who doesn't have good growth, this is your friend, okay? And you might even think about forming groups by the growth. I don't know. I mean, probably more so by skill and things like that. But you might see some kiddos that are really struggling and not growing at all and think, maybe they should be together, maybe they shouldn't be together. I don't know. But it's a great place to come in and really start to kind of pinpoint those kiddos. Just to drive the point home, and I talked about this before, if you've got students who are in the orange and in the yellow, and their growth is below 50, you essentially have a double whammy, a dual discrepancy almost. They're discrepant in their performance, that's the color. They're discrepant in their growth, that's the SGP. Those are the kids that go to the front of the line to get intervention. In a triage system, they go first because they're the ones that most at risk because they aren't growing. You're going to see some kids that their color won't change from fall to winter, winter to spring, but the growth is really good. It's just that it's going to take them a while to get into that next kind of color range. So those kids, you're kind of happy with what's happening. It's when you see those kiddos that have kind of that double whammy that they are really good candidates to go to the front of the line to start the year to be in an intervention group. Okay. Just a few other components on here that you might be curious about. If you're wondering who the kids are right up here that we're kind of moving around my chutes and ladders thing, down here, it's represented by these arrows. Black arrow means they were one of the kids that stayed in the same tier as the one they were in. Green means they went up or down. I never know what to say. It got better. Let's put it that way. And then I don't know if I have any on here. It would be red if they went to a worse tier, less tier, whatever. So that's what's going on here. Okay. Lots of great information. Now, what I said is the one limitation to this is if you're trying to form like homogeneous groups, which I highly recommend, you're going to get way more growth and effectiveness out of your interventions if the kids in those groups all have about the same kind of need. If you're trying to do that, doing it by composite alone can be a little tricky. So you might think, I wish I could see the subtests and do it that way. So that's where we're going to leave the group reports tab for the only time in our talk today and come over to the benchmark tab. Okay, so we're going to come over to the benchmark tab. I'm going to click on this benchmark comparison, which is just basically the page you log into every single time in Aimsweb. And here's your subtest scores, right? So just by looking to the right, you've got the colors for whatever grade level this is, third grade. You know, if I go back down to, you know what, I'm actually glad this happened. You'll notice I'm trying to change a grade level and I'm getting pigeonholed. It's like, I know my account has more than just third grade. If you have something in this class field, the class field kind of dominates. So watch, if I take the class out, now the grades change. Okay. You know, so maybe you're thinking like, all right, my first graders here, early literacy. Now I can come over and kind of look at more of those discrete skills, and that may be a really good way to start to formulate who might work well in groups right when the school year starts. Okay. So we effectively answered both of the questions that were on that slide because we were looking at growth. But using kind of these two hand in hand, you're going to be able to really, I think, form groups that'll work well together. Questions for me? Stephanie, anything going on in the chat?
There are no questions in the chat thus far.
All right. Either this is making total sense to all of you and I'm doing a wonderful job, or you all fell asleep. I'll go with the first explanation. It's a lot. It's a lot to kind of digest, but I hope you see how we can present you with some real world questions that could really have impact and then show you how to use Aimsweb to provide some information for that. Granted that you always have other sources of data that have to go into those decisions as well, not just making decisions off of one data point. Why don't I give you like about 5 minutes or so? I know you saw a lot and you might have been trying to keep up and you're trying to look at your own data. Why don't we give you about 5 minutes or so just of me not talking, so that you can just kind of maybe navigate a little bit. And so I'll also give you an opportunity if you do have questions to get them into the chat. But then I want to move you into the second report to talk about that. Anybody just joining us, we've reviewed the first report. We've actually answered 5 different questions using the same report. And we're just taking a couple minutes here just to have a little independent time, about probably 3 more minutes or so, and then I'm going to present the next report. Jen, I see your question in the chat. I'll address it in just a minute. About another minute or so. I just want to be mindful of time. As I said, this is a very packed 90 minutes to get today. Okay, so there's a great question in the chat from Jennifer about whether AIMSweb can be utilized to predict performance on SBA. You're seeing that the district very high AIMSweb data and more moderate SBA performance. So back in the day, yeah, we were actually, I mean, this is going back a ways. That's how long Steffi and I have been doing this. We were linked to state exams. I remember I lived in Illinois at the time, and it was really predicative of it, like the cut points that they had for us at the time. The issue now is those high stakes assessments and things, it seems like they change all the time, you know, and no pun intended, it's kind of like a moving target now. I know AIMSweb is always looking for partners. You can always try and do one internally, right? Like use that data and the AIMSweb data. But if you reach out to our research team, I know they're always interested in partnering. So that might be an avenue where they might be interested in looking at that with you. So yeah, it's existed before, to answer your question here. Another question in the chat, why doesn't the SGP from fall to spring seem to mesh with the two numbers fall to winter and winter to spring? It's probably because of the shift in the norms, right? Like the norms shift from fall to winter to spring. So it's probably has something to do with that. I'd have to take a little bit closer look at it though, Kevin. If you want to leave me your email address, I'd love to follow up with you on that one because I think it's a good question. That's my suspicion though. Okay. All right, so let's jump back to where we were at here. I want to introduce to you a graph that I think people avoid. I'm going to be honest with you. And I'm hoping that by me showing it to you, you're going to realize how much power this can have. And I think the reason that people maybe avoid it is they try to come in and they try to make it work. And it can be a little bit confusing because there are a lot of drop downs. And if you kind of don't work the drop downs in a certain fashion, it doesn't really give you what you're hoping for. And I also think a lot of people just don't know what it can offer. So it is called the benchmark distribution report. The two sort of objectives we're going to meet here by looking at this are, again, looking at trends and then looking at future decisions for programming. The irony is some of the questions that we ask when we look at trends could also basically satisfy those for programming. Before I get to the graph itself, though, and show it to you, let me explain to you what it is, okay, so that you understand it. So benchmark distribution is another word for spread. Okay, so when your students take the assessments, they get scores, right? However many words they read correct or letters correct or sounds or whatever. Those raw scores all have a range or a spread amongst your students. Sometimes that spread is really wide, like you've got some kids that did really poor, some kids that were way off the charts at the top, which makes it a really wide spread. Sometimes whatever the assessment is, they all kind of got about the same score, like the spread isn't all that different. So what this graph is trying to show you visually is like what kind of a spread or distribution do you have in those raw scores? That's the first thing. Okay, and that's represented in the darker colored bar. So that's you. That's essentially your local norm. Okay, now in some of these questions that we're going to ask and in some of the ways that we're going to kind of manipulate the graph, you are also going to want to compare that to the nation, right? Because the darker color bar is your distribution, your spread. You want to know how that stacks up against the nation. That's the lighter colored bar that's kind of next to it or to the right of it. Okay, so you've always kind of got that comparison. So sometimes we're going to be comparing against the nation. Some of these you're going to see, and this is really the advantage of this graph, is you might be comparing against yourself. Like you're interested in the nation, but the way that we set the graph up, you've put multiple grade levels on it. And you want to see, are there holes in my data? You know, like things are great until third grade and then things fall off the cliff. So the comparison isn't always going to be you versus the nation. Sometimes it's you versus you because you're looking for those trends to be able to maybe change some things or continue some things. Okay, so you'll see that as we go. Down below in the table, it keeps track of the number of students in the different percentile ranges. Now, what's odd about this graph, and I've never understood it, is the orange color and the royal blue color. So those extremes, they're there, but they're not there. They're not there in color because you don't see them. You only see the three colors. But if you look down into the table, the first to the 10th percentile is the orange, and the 90 through the 99th is the blue. So visually they're not there, but numerically they are. So I don't know. I don't know why. Maybe it's because those are really kind of like the outlier ranges and they didn't put them on the graph, but just know that you've always got the number count down below. Okay. One last note about this before I show you how to find it and we answer some questions on it. If your bar is really stretched, really tall, that means you've got a lot of spread in there. The scores are really different and kind of all over the place. If your bar is really tiny and kind of crunched down together, your scores are all kind of clustered, you know, similarly. So that'll be the difference in sort of the stretch of that bar. All the little number flags on there are just trying to give you an idea of the exact number, because if you look at the axis to the left, it's kind of hard sometimes to know. So the flags are there to kind of tell you exactly what you're looking at. Okay. So let me show you. Oop. Too fast, too furious. Let's back up. So these are a couple of the questions we're going to ask and answer. I am keeping my eye on the time, so I want to be mindful of that. So we'll get through as many of these as we can. But these are the questions that we're going to look at to sort of identify trends. Okay, so we're going to start with, do we notice a trend amongst the grade level composite scores? So that's the nice thing about this graph you're going to see in just a second, is it can disaggregate the data much more than any other graph in Aimsweb. Okay, you're going to be able to slice and dice this thing. You're going to be able to put multiple grade levels, multiple years, multiple time periods, all on the same graph, where a lot of the other graphs are kind of static. This one can hold a lot more. Okay, so let's go find it together first. It is under the group reports tab. I promise we're not going to leave there anymore today. Group reports back to the left, it's the first one. Benchmark distribution. Lots of drop downs. Now, I will tell you that I have found success by working from top to bottom. If you start in the middle and start changing things, it usually affects things at the top and it just makes it much more cumbersome. So I would recommend working from top to bottom. For my district folks that are on here, same thing that we saw with the tier transition. If you want the district view, just make sure that the school is cleared out, kind of right in the middle. Make sure class is cleared out. Whatever you generate then is district level. Okay. So starting again at the top, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to start with the test. Okay, so what am I interested in viewing? So I'm going to do the reading battery, which is also known as the composite. I don't know why they gave it two different names, but if you see read B in the list, that's the composite. Okay. If you see ELB, that's the early literacy composite. I don't know why they call it a battery as well, whatever. So I'm going to do read B. Now it's the show and the group by that run this thing. Okay, these are the two that are going to generate the view on the screen. Okay, so my question was about, I think it was across grade levels. I'm just looking here. Yeah, do we notice a trend amongst the grade level composite? So the first thing I'm thinking is like, all right, I'm looking, I want to know across the period. period, what they mean is fall, winter, spring. It's not like your class periods, it's fall, winter, spring. But look at all these other ways to disaggregate the data. Now, most districts don't take advantage of this because when you import your students into the account, you probably just met the minimum level that was required of the demographics to get the kids in there. Going forward, if you want to add things like service code, ESL, ELL, meal status, probably not meal status, Section 504, any of these things, that all occurs in the import. If you add that to your import for the next year, this report can disaggregate the data even more. Okay, and you can really drill down. But most people are kind of at that basic level because they just get the kids in there. Just whatever I got to do to, meet the minimum requirements and get them in there. As you progress through with AIMSWeb, you might want to think about adding these things in here. So I'm going to do it by period. And then I want to further group by the grade. Okay, because my question was, how does the grade level composite look across grades? What I'm looking at now is, are there like spots where maybe I'm having great success in one grade level and then it kind of drops off in the next grade level? Okay, I'm going to follow this down. All of this is okay still, roster type, district, school level. Again, if you're at the district level, you don't want anything in the school. Now I get to tell it the grade span that I want to look at on the graph. So I'm going to do grade 2 to grade 3, because I know that's your primary focus when you're looking at the battery, at least for reading. And I know you've got early literacy too, that's K and 1. I'm not going to put a class in, and the rest of this is fine. View and refresh, and I get a graph that looks like this. Now, the more stuff you put on here, the more kind of busy it gets because of all the flags and the numbers. But now what I have is I have grade 2, fall, winter, spring, versus grade 3, fall, winter, spring. And I can see those distributions. So in this case, I might not be comparing to the nation. I mean, I probably am, but what I'm really interested in is, like, how does this look across the grade that year, but then then comparing the grades to each other? Do I have great success in a couple grade levels and then this giant drop off? Or do I have poor success, but then all of a sudden, like, everything clicks and things are going well? So this is a way that you can take and compare grade levels, and you don't have to do it just at the composite. We could do it at any of the subtests as well. So anything that you get, we could do this for oral reading fluency. In fact, let me do it. Let's see. Oral reading, what you have to watch is these things reset themselves. I wish they didn't, but we're going to put that in as kind of a feature request. So periods, and then what did we say? Grade. 2nd through 3rd, view and refresh. Now it's comparing oral reading fluency. Okay. So at the building level, if you're a building administrator, you can look across your grade levels. If you're at the district level, you can look across the entirety of grade 2 and grade 3 and see how things are performing. Okay. Now, the second question that we could answer with this particular graph is, how about, are there certain classrooms within a grade level that have consistently higher or lower benchmark scores than others for whatever subtest you want? So this is probably more of a building level thing, but if at the district level you wanted to look at it, but wouldn't it be interesting to know, like, am I getting better results out of certain classrooms versus the others? Why is that? Could I potentially tap into the ones that are having a lot of success and see what their secret sauce is, essentially? And can I replicate that maybe in the other classrooms where I'm not getting that level of success? So the way that one goes, and we'll stick with oral reading fluency, but now I'm going to show by classes, and I want to group by period. So it's really just playing with these two to kind of get it to what you want it to do. Just be aware that whatever you pick here, you might have to go down the drop downs a little ways and make a few more selections. So I wanted to see grade 1. And what you're going to have to notice here is, see, the view and refresh button doesn't become active. Okay, because it's waiting for you to tell it which classes do you want to compare. So I'm going to compare all of these first grade classes. Now, I could have done something like this with the triangle, but remember, I would have to look at every single class individually. I could only do it at the composite level. So here, I'm going to put all the classes on one graph, and I can do it for any subtest that I want. So I'm going to apply it, view and refresh. And now here's fall, and here's the three or four classes. It looks like two maybe actually had data. But again, the dark bar being, you locally. You can compare the classes in the fall to each other. Here's the winter. I can compare the classes again there. And if you have more that, that won't fit on the screen, if you come down right next to this little chart, there's a page button where you can move over to see spring. Spring, apparently there was no data because this is national. If it's the light, it's national. That'll always be there. But the dark bar is you. Okay, so here's a way that you can now look at it by classroom, and by subtest if you want, or composite, and start to make some decisions about strengths and weaknesses, maybe even resource allocation, professional development, whatever it might be, moving into that implement a plan phase once you've seen the data and kind of asked your questions about it. Okay. So there are a couple more questions on here in your workbook that I have kind of left you. I am looking at our time. I do want to be mindful of it because I do at least want to introduce one more graph to you and then allow a few minutes for Q&A. I can always come back to this one at the end if you wanted to see a few more answers to those questions. But I hope you're seeing, how you really just a manipulation of, the menus over here to kind of get it to display what you want. I'm looking real quick because I know there was one. Yeah, let me show you this one just real quick. This is a district level one before we leave this. And this again is in your workbook. And the question is, by the end of third grade, what percentage of district students are at or above average on whatever score? Let's say the reading composite. How am I going to make that one work? So again, always starting with the test. So it was, let's say the reading battery is what I'm interested in, or the composite. Okay, so now I'm going to show, let's see, so it was the district, it was grade 3. So I'm going to show by period because I want to see fall, winter, spring, because I want to know by the end of the year how they are. And let's see, grouping, I'm not going to group any further than that. All I want to see is just grade 3, basically fall, winter, and spring. So I'm going to come down here, I'm going to get rid of school because I'm doing this at the district level. Nothing is in the class, I'm just going to change my grade level. And then view and refresh. So the question was, by the end of third grade, so by the spring, what percentage of our kids across the district are at or above average on the composite? The best way to do that is to look at the chart down below. Average is this 26th percentile and up. So if I counted these kids, 7, 6, and 6, so what's that, 19 kids? 19 out of 30 are average or above average. That means I have 11 below average. I'd rather that be higher, I'll be honest with you, because now I've got 11 kids going into fourth grade that starting the year are already, below average. So you start talking about forming intervention groups. It's like, what are you going to do for those 11 kids that are going into fourth grade that are leaving third grade, below average? And this, of course, is a district view, so the numbers would be larger, but you could do this at the school view as well. But just an example of how you at the end of the year can be a little bit more summative with that data and kind of reflective on where we've landed now that the year is ended. And then the plan of what going forward, like what are we going to do? What do we do for those kids moving forward? But then what do we do for the kids that are coming up to third grade so that more of them leave at the end of their third grade year being at average or above average? What's that plan to make things better while also planning for those kiddos now that are moving on to the next grade level? How are we going to help them out? You can also do this by school if you're at the district level. If you're going to show by schools instead, you can compare schools to each other on here. So the possibilities are really endless. I think some people get intimidated by this, and really the best thing to do is just come in and play with it. Put a couple things in the show by and the group by, view and refresh and see what you get, because you can disaggregate and cut this data so many different ways. All right, and I know we are tight up against our time here. I told you it was a packed 90 minutes. I didn't lie to you. There's just so much that I want to share with you, and I want to at least make sure that you have exposure to, so that you can kind of turn around and at least have some of that basic knowledge to move forward. So the third and final graph is called the ROI Growth Norms Report. As much as important as it is to know students' performance, it's just as important, maybe more important, to be able to report on their growth. SGP is the way that happens. So we can look at individual students, and we kind of saw that when we had the triangle put the students' names down there. We can look at individual students, but the question is, can we also look at groups? Can we look at groups of students and how they grew across the year to be able to identify some trends, also to be able to maybe make some programmatic decisions, right? Like if we're not getting a lot of good growth at kindergarten, like what the heck is going on? Like kids should take off like rockets in kindergarten, right? Like growth is always front loaded in those early grade levels. If we're not getting good growth, then we've got to sit back and think, why? So again, looking at trends, looking at future decisions for programming, this graph needs a little bit of explanation as well, just because of the way that it's laid out. The one I just showed you is the spread of raw scores. This is the spread of growth scores. So the spread of SGPs. So it took all your kiddos' growth percentiles and essentially showed the distribution of them. Okay, that's the gray bar. That's your spread. The national average is in between the dashed lines. Okay, so it's a little bit different than the last one, but ideally what you'd like to see is that gray bar, like at the top of that average range, even maybe peaking above that top dash line, like these two here on my screen. I would be thrilled. I mean, wow, most of my kids are in those upper SGPs, right? In kindergarten and in first grade, because that gray bar is really above the 50th and really sticking out even above the top end of average, which is like the 76th percentile, 75th. So what we're looking at here is, now are we getting growth from groups of students? Okay, and these groups could be, you could make custom groups again. So there's another spot. You could put all your special ed students or all your whatever students into a custom group and see how their growth looks relative to, other populations. Now down below in this graph, the SGP ranges, and they range from 5 to 95 in increments of 5. You get a count down there. Okay, so a count of how many students grew at what percentile and what part of the population did they make up. That's what's in parentheses. Okay, so I hope that explanation helps a little bit. I want to show you how to answer a question or two about it, and then just turn it over to you for any questions at all about AIMSweb. So back to just a real quick final transition, back to some questions that we could ask and answer. About in which time interval did you witness the most growth from kindergartners on any test? Are you getting a lot of growth from fall to winter, winter to spring? I know you don't have, that first one this year, so this will be more of a next year question for you. But we can put kindergarten up on that screen and see, how their growth compared from one time period to another time period to make some judgment, and then be able to look at that and say, what's going on in the instruction in between those two periods if there's a vast difference in the amount of growth that's occurring. Maybe it's not the instruction, maybe there's other explanations, but you can certainly answer a question like that. Or how about, do certain grade levels exhibit better growth than others from fall to spring, or even winter to spring on the composite? So let me at least show you one of these. Okay, so group reports. Again, over here to ROI growth norms. let's answer that kindergarten question first. I know you don't have fall data this year, but let's answer that kindergarten question about like, where am I getting most of my growth? Is it front loaded? Is it kind of equally distributed across the year? You know, is it more on the back end? You know, and what do I do with that kind of information? Excuse me. So if I do, let's see. And again, if I leave school and class out, then it's a district view. If I put school in, obviously now I'm, you know, more of a building administrator. I'm going to look at just kindergarten. So I'm going to restrict this kind of grade comparison. And I'm going to look at letter, word, sound fluency. Okay. Now, a nice feature about this is as you use AimsWeb across the years, this one can actually handle multiple years of data. And so you can compare last year's kindergarten to this year's kindergarten, you know, and see if there were changes. The one little, maybe I won't say shortcoming, but limit to this is you're only going to be able to put one time period on the graph at a time. I wish you could do like multiples. So it would require maybe like a downloading or screenshotting or printing if you're looking to compare across, you know, multiple time periods. You can certainly do fall to spring, which would capture the entire year. But if you're trying to do kind of what I'm doing here, which is like, do I have front loaded growth? Do I have back end growth? You know, I'm going to look at fall to winter first and view and refresh. Now that's all my kindergartners at this particular school. Again, if I take the school out and view and refresh, it would be my kindergartners at the entire district. So you can see some pretty good growth. I really want that gray bar to be in between the dashed lines at a minimum, okay? Then what I'd really like is to see most of the gray bar towards the top end of that average, if I could, and maybe even peaking out above the top of that dash line. What I really don't want to see is that gray bar lower, you know, like outside of the average range, below that dash line. That starts to tell me that, you know, most of my growth is not going to be adequate. Okay, so to answer the question, it's like, all right, like how does the growth in the fall to winter here compare? So I'm going to go down here because I think I can use the table to get the information a little bit more. So I might be looking at average growth range, which would be like the 25th up to the 75th. And I can look at how many kids that is. So it's like 11, 12, 14, 17, looks like about 18 kids maybe. And then what I could do is just flip it to winter to spring and kind of look at the same comparison. You know, do I have the same amount of kiddos kind of growing in that average SGP? Also, just visually, what does it look like? Does the bar look different from fall to winter or winter to spring? Now, in this example, I know you're probably thinking, yeah, but you told me SGP has to be above 50. Well, remember, I said that's for the kiddos that are behind. They need that advanced growth. When we're just looking across like the grade level in a building or a district, we're going to widen that a little bit to include the average range of growth, knowing that the kiddos that are behind, when we look at them individually, their SGP is going to have to be elevated to catch up. But if this indicated to me that I was not getting a lot of growth at the beginning of the year, especially in like kindergarten and first grade, then I go back and I have that conversation about what does the programming look like? Oh, why aren't the kids growing, you know, fast, you know, faster, I should say, at the beginning of the year? Why is it taking so long for us to see that growth? You know, is that just developmental? Is it something in the way we're doing things, you know, and vice versa? If we're getting no growth from winter to spring or very, very low growth, like what the heck happened, you know, from January to June or whatever, that all of a sudden the growth kind of tailed off, right? So there's a number of different ways you can use this graph, but I want you to know that incorporating growth in your review of your data is really important. It's one thing to look at performance. You also want to honor the fact that you want those kids to continue to grow, and we've got to pay attention to how growth is occurring during the year, and whether we need to, you know, make some changes to it or even replicate. You know, I keep talking about things that need to change, but you might see a lot of really good success, and you go and start asking questions so that we can maintain that success. Okay, so in that workbook, I can still speak, in that workbook that you have, there are a number of other questions about the graphs. I hope that at least today, just the introduction of these three and kind of showing you how they can be applied just to sample questions. You might not even use these exact questions, but so that you can see how you can translate that and into that next phase of that data sort of analysis, of, coming up with a plan to move forward as this school year ends, the next one begins. So with that said, I know I threw a lot at you and it was a kind of a quick pace. But I'm going to leave the last couple minutes open for any kind of questions or comments or anything that I can help with. Also, while I'm doing that, and I know my friend Stephanie will probably put this in the chat as well, I will put up on here a QR code, and I think Stephanie has the link too that she'll put in the chat. Just a brief survey about today's training. Stephanie, did we have anything come up in the chat that needs to be addressed?
Sorry, having trouble finding my cursor. I just wanted Kevin Chavez, if you would check the chat and make sure that question is answered with what you're asking, because I think that was referring to why the numbers of kids may be different at the end of the year in that sample. So that's explained if kids move in and out during the year, that AIMSWeb is going to capture at the end of the year the number of kiddos that were in that classroom, but it does not eliminate if there were extra students in the fall and that were in the class, that will be captured in that fall to winter data. But fall to spring, if the numbers have changed, it's capturing the kiddos that are there at the end of the year and have taken the last assessment.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And Kevin, you're asking, can you explain at the end? If you want to come off mute and explain, that's fine. If that's not capturing your answer question.
And I'm coming off mute and I'm just trying to go back now to where that particular trying to remember where the transition was. Hang on.
Was it in that
So-
triangle graph?
Yeah. So I've got it. So what I was getting at is, and I don't know if I'm just looking at this wrong. Of course, I'm looking at a different class right now. Sorry. So when I was looking at the SGP, right, from the fall to winter, I'm looking across, let's say oh wow, this one is not it either. So I was looking across and I know that the SGP in the fall to winter, let's say, was like 45. And then in the winter to spring, it went down to 35. But then when I looked at fall to spring, the number was up around 60. I couldn't figure out why there would be such a discrepancy like that when the fall to winter is one, and then all of a sudden at the end it's beyond.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't think that had anything to do with the number of kids. Because Stephanie, I do appreciate that. Thank you, because I do know my numbers have changed across the year.
Yeah, so you're talking about the part at the very bottom of the graph when we're looking at the overall SGP. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it's not an exact average. Like you might think it's kind of an average of the two. In your situation, so you're looking at fall to winter SGP, then winter to winter to spring.
Right, but if the fall to spring is an average, I couldn't understand how the average could be greater than both of the numbers.
Yeah,
it
it's
wasn't
not
making
an
any sense to me.
Right, it's not an average. So what happens is within those SGP is basically generated by the amount, well, you got the amount of weeks in there too, and the amount of weeks in between the benchmarks, but it is not an average of the two. We can try and get you more of a specific explanation to that though, Kevin, but.
Okay, yeah, and I have to go back to find the exact class I was looking at. It wasn't making sense.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what, I'm gonna put my email in here, and if you wouldn't mind just shooting me an email so I have yours.
Absolutely.
And then I will absolutely follow up. I'm gonna put that in the chat right now.
Thank you.
I will absolutely follow up with you on that.
Terrific. I'll put this off to the side for now because I've got something I'm doing as soon as we're done, and then I'll email you in a little while.
Sounds great. Look forward to it.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Appreciate it.
Also in the chat, everybody just check out Stephanie posted, there's another really nice resource that we have in the, I think it's in the the how can we help area, about all the reports. Just information about all of them. And of course, the 3 that we talked about today will be in there, but there'll be some information about the other ones as well. Okay, well, we have reached our agreed upon time limit. I am going to hang around though for a few minutes. If anybody wants to hang around and ask any questions, I do want to thank you again for your time. I know this is a really crazy busy time of the year. And we gave you a lot to think about today, but I hope it's gonna invite some conversations and looking at that data. If you run into situations, you can all see my email address in there. If you run into situations where you can't get a graph to generate, or you look at one of those questions in the workbook and you really wish you could get yours to do that, just shoot me an email. I don't mind helping at any point. I want to make sure that you're getting out of today what you needed. So just want to tell you that we appreciate you, and certainly we appreciate our partnership with our friends at the state level as well. So thank you everybody for today.
Scott, thank you from CSDE as well. And thanks all for attending today's webinar. And I don't know, Scott, if you said this, but these resources or a recorded version of this will be posted on our website. I don't know, within a week or so. So I don't want to make any promises, but it should be there. So thank you.
Wonderful. Thanks, everybody.
Have a nice afternoon.